This stadium blanket is perfect for taking out to the game on cloudy, chilly days, or even for sitting at home in front of the TV. It makes a perfect gift for the sporting fan in your life. It is also a great way to build your serger skills, since it uses the flatlock stitch. The flatlock is perfect for the seams in this blanket, and you'll also use the flatlock to make a serger blanket stitch along the edges. You'll even learn some additional techniques, such as how to machine attach a button on a conventional sewing machine. This stadium blanket is baseball themed, but if you're not a baseball fan, you can use the design as a springboard for your own version. The blanket is a color block design that joins together several cut pieces. The flatlock stitch creates a flat seam with no exposed seam allowances, so it's perfect for a double-sided project like this one. The center of the playing field is made from fabric with a team logo. The lanes around the sides and the bases at each corner are blocked with solid colors. A small amount of piecework creates a home plate at one corner. The finished blanket is 72 by 72 inches, around 1.8 meters square, and is large enough for 2 people. It also has a built-in cinch strap with a button closure, so you can easily roll it up and carry it to and from the game. You'll need 3 colors of polar fleece fabric or other thick fabric suitable for making a blanket. This project uses 60-inch, 152 centimeters, width fabric throughout. Fabric A forms the bases, and you'll need about 1/2 yard, 1/2 meter. White resembles a base in baseball. Fabric B forms the side lanes, and you'll need 1 1/4 yards, 1 1/4 meter. This blanket uses black to keep on theme with the team colors, but you can choose a color that resembles a real baseball field. Fabric C forms the infield, and here you'll need 1 1/2 yards, 1 1/2 meters. This blanket uses a fabric with a team logo. To reinforce the attachment point for the cinch strap, you'll need a small amount of a strong woven fabric such as canvas, denim, or duck cloth. A scrap will do. You'll need serger thread for the seams. The flatlock stitch is like top stitching. It is a visible part of the project, so decide if you want the stitches to contrast or blend in with your design. For the serger blanket stitch binding, choose a heavier decorative thread, such as top stitch thread or jeans thread. I like a contrasting color for the binding, but choose what you like. You'll also need some washable embroidery stabilizer. It is usually used for machine embroidery, but in this project it is part of a special technique to create the blanket stitch. For the cinch strap, you'll need about 1 yard, 1 meter, of grosgrain ribbon, webbing, or heavy twill tape about 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters wide. I bought a licensed baseball team lanyard to repurpose. You'll also need a button about 3/4 inch, 2 centimeters in diameter. Finally, you might want some fray block seam sealant solution to finish seams and buttonholes. Your serger should be capable of making a 2 or 3 thread flatlock stitch. Check your owner's manual. For serging polar fleece, choose either a universal or a jersey ballpoint needle, size 80-12 or 90-14. To make the serger blanket stitch, you'll also need a top stitch needle to accommodate the heavier top stitch thread. For measuring and cutting, you'll need scissors, pinking shears, marking chalk, and a long ruler or measuring tape. Quilting tools can be helpful, such as a quilting ruler, rotary cutter, and a rotary cutting mat. Finally, it's a good idea to use fabric clips rather than pins to protect your serger. Unlike pins, clips will not enter the cutting blades by accident. If you need help finding these tools and notions, I have links in the description to purchase them. The blanket is mostly made from squares and rectangles. The home plate corner piece uses a pattern that you can download for free from my website. The download also has a complete list of all pieces and their dimensions. The link is in the description. This project uses 1/2 inch, 13 millimeter seam allowances throughout. Begin by cutting 3 squares, each 11 by 11 inches, 28 centimeters, in size from fabric A. These form the bases. cut the home plate piece from fabric A using the pattern. If you don't have the pattern, here are the dimensions to cut. From fabric B, cut 3 triangles using the pattern. This forms the inset framing home plate. If you don't have the pattern, here are the dimensions to cut. Also from fabric B, cut 4 large long rectangles, each 11 inches, 28 centimeters, wide by 53 inches, 135 centimeters, long. These form the 4 lanes at the sides of the field. From fabric C, cut 1 large square, 53 inches by 53 inches, 135 centimeters. This piece forms the infield. Finally, cut the cinch strap reinforcement. Cut 1 square about 3 inches by 3 inches, 8 centimeters, from the heavy fabric D. Pink the edges with pinking shears to prevent them from fraying. Next, prepare your serger for a flatlock stitch as directed by your owner's manual. Set it up for a 2-thread flatlock stitch if your serger has it. Otherwise, use the 3-thread flatlock. If you need help understanding the flatlock stitch, I have a video that explains it in detail. There's a link in the description. Turn the cutter blade on. The flatlock stitch does not require the cutter blade, but for this project we want the cutter blade to cleanly finish the seams. Set the stitch length to around 3 or 3.5 millimeters and the stitch width as wide as your serger allows. Next, adjust your serger's differential feed. Fleece fabric is a knit fabric and so it has stretch. The differential feed can prevent wavy seams in stretch fabrics. If you need help with the differential feed, check out my video. The link is in the description. Do some test stitches on scrap fabric from your project to make sure your thread and machine settings are correct. The blanket is assembled in stages. First, prepare the home plate piece. Then stitch together 2 sides of the blanket by joining corner pieces to side pieces. Next, attach 2 side pieces without corners to the centerpiece. Attach the 2 remaining sides with corners to complete the main blanket. Once the main blanket is complete, finish the outer edge with a serger blanket stitch. Finally, attach the cinch strap and install a button to complete the project. The flatlock stitch has a ladder look on one side and loops on the other side. The ladders appear on the inside, where the layers meet each other. Before starting each new seam, I check that the ladder sides always meet each other so all seams remain consistent. Fleece also has a right side and a wrong side, so take care to keep them consistent throughout the project as well. Throughout the project, leave starting and ending thread tails on every seam. And after you stitch each seam, you should pull gently on both sides of the seam to open and set the stitch. Let's get started by piecing together home plate. Align the cut edges of the long edge of a triangle to a long edge of the home plate and clip together. The fabric feeds in at an angle for these seams, so take care that the stitch starts cleanly. You can use a stiletto to hold the layers in place as they enter the presser foot. Stitch the seam, then grab both sides and pull gently to set the stitch. Then repeat this process for the other 2 pieces. When you have finished this step, the home plate piece will look like this. Take one side lane piece and attach it to the home plate. The pointy part of the home plate forms an outside corner. Allow the cutting blade to trim the thread tails as it encounters them. On the far end of the lane piece, attach one of the base squares. Leave starting and ending thread tails on everything. Take the second side lane piece and attach the remaining 2 base squares, just as you did in the previous step. When you have finished this step, you will have 2 completed side lanes. 2 untouched lane pieces remain. Attach them to opposite sides of the large infield piece. On this very long seam, the top layer can bunch up. If this happens, stop, raise the presser foot, smooth the fabric, lower the presser foot, and continue. Also, pinch both layers of fabric between thumb and forefinger and twist your thumb and forefinger slightly upward to keep the layers from shifting as you serge. If the layers don't precisely match at the end of the seam, don't stress too much. You can fix this later. For now, resist the temptation to trim the edges. When you have finished this step, the main infield will look like this. Now take the 2 lanes with corners and attach them to the open sides of the infield. Match up the corner seams where bases meet the infield and clip them together right at that point. If you have some seams that ended unevenly, clip layers with the excess beyond the edge of the other layer and taper it until both raw edges meet once more. The serger cutter blade will trim that small bit of excess. As the corner seams enter the presser foot and approach the cutter blade, use a stiletto to keep them aligned. Allow the cutter blade to trim away the thread tails as it goes over them. After stitching, pull on both sides to set the seam. At this point, congratulations! You have assembled the main blanket and are now ready to finish the edges with a serger blanket stitch. If you would like to fully master your serger, I have created Serger Bootcamp, an ebook with over 150 photos and step-by-step instructions covering all the essential techniques. The link is in the description. To make the blanket stitch, first rethread your serger with a heavy decorative thread in the needle and regular serger thread in the loopers. Top stitch or jeans thread creates a decorative blanket stitch. Install a top stitch needle to allow for the heavier thread. If your serger will not accept regular domestic sewing machine needles, just use a larger size needle, such as 116. Choose the widest stitch width your serger allows, and a stitch length around 3 or 4 millimeters, or whatever looks good to you. Finally, make sure the cutter blade is on for a cleanly trimmed edge. Do another test stitch. The heavier thread and the single layer of fleece can make thread tensions and the differential feed behave differently. Readjust tension and differential feed settings until you once again get a proper, flatlock stitch. The blanket stitch uses a layer of washable embroidery stabilizer in place of the top layer of fabric. Place a layer of the stabilizer on top of the blanket, edges aligned, and clip together. If you have individual sheets of stabilizer, stagger several pieces along the length of the edge. Make sure each piece slightly overlaps the next. Serge the edge with a flatlock stitch, stabilizer on top. Use a 1/2 inch 13 millimeter seam allowance and leave starting and ending thread tails on both sides. Allow the cutter blade to trim any thread tails from the corner seams. The blanket stitch will enclose and finish them. After you finish each side, grab both the blanket and stabilizer and pull gently to open and set the stitch. The latter side of the flatlock stitch gives a blanket stitch effect. You can use a stiletto to touch up missed bits. Trim away the excess stabilizer. You can tear it away, but do so carefully. Tearing away can distort the fabric and leave a wavy edge. The remaining stabilizer washes away. As you start the next side, Allow the cutter blade to trim the ending thread tail from the previous side. After all 4 sides are complete, finish the stitches at each corner by running the thread tails into the stitching with an embroidery needle. You can also use liquid seam sealant to finish the corners and seam intersections. At this point, the main blanket is complete. And if you find this tutorial helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. To attach the cinch strap, thread a conventional sewing machine using a heavy 90-14 or 116 universal or jersey needle and all-purpose sewing thread. Select a straight stitch and a stitch length of 3.5. Fold the blanket lengthwise twice. Along the outermost short edge, find the midpoint and make a chalk mark. Position the reinforcement square at the mark you made and pin it in place next to the edge. Stitch the reinforcement square in place. Backstitch at the beginning and end of the stitch. Edge stitch a box around the perimeter. Then pivot and stitch 2 additional diagonal lines that cross through the center. Stitch a second time over the edges to move from one corner to the next. Now, fold up one end of the ribbon. Pin it to the reinforcement with the folded edge facing towards the blanket. Leave some space on the reinforcement for a button. Edge stitch the ribbon in place, then pivot and stitch 2 additional diagonal lines crossing through the center. Backstitch at the beginning and end of the stitch. Next, attach a button to act as a closure for the cinch strap. Use your sewing machine's button attachment foot if you have one. If you don't have this foot, I'll show you an alternative. Select the zigzag stitch. Set a stitch width about the same as the distance between the holes in your button. Disable the feed dogs on your machine, or set the stitch length to 0, whichever your machine allows, so that fabric does not advance. If your machine has a speed control, lower it to the minimum. Temporarily tape the button into place next to the start of the ribbon. Situate the button underneath the button foot and align the needle with the holes in the button. Slowly turn the hand wheel to check that the needle does not hit the button. Reposition the button and adjust the stitch width until this is the case. Place a stiletto between the holes. This creates a thread shank. If you do not have the button attachment foot, you can use your regular zigzag foot. Tape a coffee stirrer or ballpoint pen refill to the foot between the buttonholes. Slowly stitch in place about 8 complete stitches. Then remove the button from the machine and cut the threads. Do the same for the other set of holes if your button has them. Remove the basting tape. Using a needle, bring the thread tails to the back of the blanket and tie them off. Don't forget to raise the feed dogs if you have lowered them. Now, fold the blanket twice and roll it up. Wrap the cinch strap snugly around the blanket. Where the far end of the cinch strap meets up with the button, make a mark for the buttonhole. Install the buttonhole foot and select the buttonhole stitch. Use a universal needle, 80-12 for ribbon, 90-14 or 116 for heavyweight webbing. Use a wide stitch width of about 6.0 and a stitch length of about 0.4. Insert the button in the buttonhole foot. If you have only one button, use another of the same size. Finally, do a test stitch. Stitch a buttonhole at the mark. Cut the buttonhole open with a chisel, scissors, or seam ripper. You can use some liquid seam sealant to seal the buttonhole if you like. At least 1.5 inches past the buttonhole, trim off the excess ribbon. Fold the cut end back about 1/2 inch and pin. Stitch the fold closed with a bar tack or a zigzag stitch to finish the strap. To wrap up, run the blanket through the laundry to wash away the embroidery stabilizer. Your stadium blanket is complete. Take it out to the game. For more videos like this one, like and subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated.